So in the last video, we talked about John Dalton's postulates within his modern atomic theory and how he drew them from Democritus' ideas as well as application of the new scientific method. If you remember, his last postulate that we talked about was the idea of energy being created or destroyed. And we said, well, yes, that's true. However, he didn't have a full knowledge of the idea of radioactivity. And that's what we're going to pick up in this video. And kind of the founding father, I guess you could say, of radioactivity was Becquerel. And so what did Becquerel do? Well, he discovered uranium caused the darkening of photographic plates that had been wrapped carefully, right? So think about camera film, right? I don't know if any of you really have ever used a camera that actually uses film, but if you have, you know that you've got to keep the film safe from, or protected, that is, from being exposed to sunlight, or really any type of light, because, well, it causes it to develop. Kind of the same idea here, except Becquerel realized that it could be totally covered up where no sunlight could hit it, but if you had uranium close by, it would still darken the plate, right? And he was like, well, no other element does this. And he realized that it was a form of radiation, right? A form of energy. And it was even more energetic than the X-ray. By the way, Becquerel did not discover the X-ray. That was another scientist. But he discovered that this energy being given off by the uranium was more energetic than an X-ray, which of course is, it's got some energy, but I mean, we get X-rays all the time of our bodies, and obviously it's not harmful, but it is a form of radiation. Well, this was the beginning of nuclear chemistry, right? And I want you to put some things in perspective here. Becquerel was working with a radioactive element, right? He didn't know how dangerous it was, but, he just had it on his desk, maybe held it in his hand and was always around it. Yeah, and again, didn't realize what he was exposing himself to, right? Obviously, we wouldn't hold uranium in our hands today, and obviously, we wouldn't sit on the lab table and be around it all the time. But he didn't know about radioactivity. He kind of discovered it, but he didn't, he didn't realize the full effect of it. So he was a pioneer in the field for sure. And while we're talking about how energetic radioactive things can be, there are different types of, I guess you could say, sources of radiation, and they have different strengths. So you have alpha particles, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit. They're not, it's a source of radiation, but no big deal, right? Sheet of paper can stop them, right? So obviously your skin can also. Beta particles, again, a radiation source. Your shirt can stop it. Your t-shirt can stop a beta particle, or just a few millimeters of aluminum foil, right? So a sheet of aluminum foil or a shirt can stop a beta particle. But you have gamma rays, right? And as you can see here, radioactive elements. They're stopped by several feet of concrete or a few inches of lead, right? So, and you might wonder, by the way, why you wear a lead vest. Sometimes we get an X-ray. Well, I'm not saying that it's all gamma rays and just super, super strong and going to give you cancer, right? But it is used to prevent the radiation from going to places where it doesn't need to be. So gamma rays are the real deal. They can totally go through organic tissue. And, you probably know that it can cause cancer, and it's just really, really bad. You don't want to be exposed to it, right? Because it can mess up the way your cells replicate and all that stuff. And you can talk to a biology teacher about all that. But, it can cause cancer, right? So Becquerel discovered radioactivity, more so that the element uranium gave off a very, very high form of radiation, therefore high energy, even more so energetic than an X-ray, right? And really, scientists after that, or Becquerel anyway after that, was like, well, okay, great, that's cool, it's a novel idea, but there's really nothing this can be used for. There's really nothing else to nuclear chemistry or the study of radiation. However, Marie Curie comes along, and she had always been an aspiring scientist. She got her doctorate degree, which was, unheard of, obviously, in the 1800s for a woman to do, particularly in the field of science, right? Physics and chemistry. And she married well. And I'm not just saying that but she really did. Pierre was also a scientist, but he was also the husband that any woman would dream for. And you'll see why in just a minute. Marie Curie said, yeah, Becquerel's not right. So Becquerel had kind of quit his work on the radioactive stuff and moved on to something else. He didn't think there's really anything else there to understand or to benefit from. But Curie was like, yeah, there is. And boy, was she right. She discovered other radioactive elements besides uranium. She discovered radium and plutonium. Now, when I mean she discovered, I mean she painstakingly developed a process in her homemade lab that took years and years and years and years and hard physical labor and a lot of material to find. But she believed in herself and she believed in her hypothesis, essentially. So she did. By the way, plutonium was handily named, I guess you could say, after her home country of Poland, which was being torn by war and just political mess. And that was kind of a subtle way of her showing her support for her country and not supporting some of the unrest going on at the time. She used something called pitch blende to discover radium and plutonium. Now, I'm not going to go through that here, but I will link a video in our Google Classroom feed that I want you to watch that supplements this and shows genuinely what Marie and Pierre Curie went through to discover these radioactive elements. It's truly, truly amazing. She was very intelligent, obviously. In fact, she was the first lady to win the Nobel Prize in, I can't remember if it was chemistry or physics or chemistry and physics, but whatever, in a science field. And the story behind it is they wanted to award them, we'll say, the Nobel Prize, but they wanted to specifically give it to Pierre because, well, he was a guy, and at the time, you just didn't do that with women. Pierre was like, nope, my wife did the most of this. This is her baby. This is her research. I'm just helping along. You're going to give it to her. And they did, right? But he could have, taken all the honor, taken all the glory, taken all the fame, received the prize on his own, and kind of booted his wife out of it. But he was like, there is no way. And so you might wonder, well, so what? They discovered 2 more radioactive elements. And by the way, might I include, again, they were working, they knew they were radioactive. They knew they gave off energy. You'll see how they knew that in the video that I'll link. But they were still handling them, right, with their hands in an open room. And, she lived longer than you would suspect from dealing with radioactive elements. But she did die of cancer later on in her life. I think it was ovarian cancer, and you wonder how she got it. If I'm not mistaken, Pierre died from cancer also, but you'll have to verify that. So, why is radioactivity and all these different types of energy, whether how high energy or whatever they be, important? Well, fast forward to the World Wars, right? Particularly, let's go to FDR during World War II. So here's the deal. FDR secretly commissioned the development of a very, very powerful bomb, much more powerful than conventional bombs at the time. Because, well, scientists had kind of, taken and run with Curie's work because she just did so much and realized, what? All this high energy that is produced from elements such as uranium and other elements could be used for, well, destruction. And we can make a big bomb that does a whole lot more than anyone's ever seen before using this nuclear energy. And so FDR is in his 4th term. By the way, you can't have any more than 2 terms now. That was an amendment that went through after FDR's death. But anyway, FDR, during his 4th term, in fact, I think maybe 3 months or so into his 4th term, unexpectedly passed away. They knew he was ill, but they didn't realize he was that ill. Harry S. Truman was his vice president, but he wasn't his vice president for all those years he was already in office. In fact, Harry S. Truman was vice president only for FDR's fourth term. So Truman had only been vice president for like 3 months. And even worse, FDR, obviously never speculated that he would die and that Truman would take office. So FDR really didn't tell Truman that much. But when he died, Truman was called to the White House and he was informed of FDR's death. And Truman was like, uh-oh, I kind of got the weight of the world on me now. And a few days later, and he didn't know a thing about the development of the atomic bomb. By the way, that was a really big deal at Oak Ridge in Middle Tennessee. He had no idea, and he was briefed about it. And this is what Harry S. Truman had to say after he was briefed about the new bomb using nuclear energy. He said, "We've discovered the most terrible bomb in the history of the world. It may be the fire destruction prophesied in the Euphrates Valley era after Noah and his fabulous ark." Now, Truman is referring to a story in Genesis where God promised that he would not destroy the earth by water anymore, as he had in the Great Flood. He said next time he would destroy it by fire. And Truman is saying that this just might be the fire that God was talking about, and which would destroy the earth, later on in time. By the way, in the Bible, that's also when the rainbow was created as a token of this, and it's interesting because the rainbow requires moisture in the air, right? But anyway, whatever. Anyway, Harry S. Truman said this, and here's the deal. Oh, I didn't realize I kept my ink here. I apologize for that. Let me explain to you the two different processes in which nuclear energy can be created, aka we can use for bombs. Now, by the way, right, we can use a whole lot. We can use nuclear energy for a whole lot more things than just bombs, right? You can use it to create clean energy, which I'm a proponent of. But anyway, it can be used for bad things, and we're talking about World War II and bombs, so let's do it. The first process where we can create nuclear energy is called fission. So here's the deal. And by the way, go back to John Dalton's postulate about energy not being created or destroyed, or atoms not being created or destroyed. This is an atom of uranium. We talked about that with Becquerel. He discovered Becquerel was radioactive. Here's the deal. When you bombard a single atom of uranium with a neutron, this is a neutron here, at high speed, so you bombard this atom of uranium with a neutron that's moving very, very fast, something interesting occurs. The uranium atom literally splits. And it splits to two totally different atoms. This is krypton. This is barium. So when you bombard an atom of uranium, well, it splits into krypton and barium. And it releases, as you can see, a ton of energy. Well, you know what that does in a bomb, right? But here's the problem with fission. There's something else created besides two new atoms and a bunch of energy. You see, 3 more neutrons are produced. These are neutrons. And obviously they're moving fast because, well, you see all this energy here? So what if you had another atom of uranium here, another atom of uranium here, and another atom of uranium here? Well, this neutron that's moving very fast is going to hit this atom of uranium. It's going to split. It's going to become krypton and barium, and it's going to release a ton more energy, and then 3 more neutrons. Uh-oh. And the one in the center here. Ton of energy, 3 more neutrons. And the last one is going to release a ton of energy and 3 more neutrons once it's bombarded by a neutron. And this forms what we call a chain reaction. RXN, by the way, is the scientist's generic term for reaction. So it's a chain reaction, right? So you could have more uranium, more uranium, more uranium, and it's just, it goes on and on and on and on and on and all that good stuff, right? So nuclear fission, and obviously every time this goes on, tons of energy is being produced, right? So as long as you have a lot of uranium, the neutrons are going to be produced automatically, and so it just goes on, releases a lot of energy, and, well, if you get the reference, boom goes the dynamite. If you don't, look it up. Pretty funny. Next, you've got nuclear fusion. And no, I'm not talking about the Ford fusion. I'm talking about another way that, well, we can use to create a lot of energy and bombs and yeah. And again, you can use nuclear energy for good things like clean energy, not just nuking people. So differentiate. Fission, you've got a really big atom. It's being split into two smaller atoms by a neutron moving really, really fast. It produces a ton of energy and more neutrons for the reaction to keep on going, as long as you have enough uranium. That's fission. But now we're going to talk about fusion. Think about this like two things can fuse together. Isn't there a drink called Fuse, but like you use a Z? I don't know. Whatever. Fusion. Two things can fuse together. Two small atoms combine. So we have two atoms here. By the way, these are hydrogen atoms. They're just isotopes of a hydrogen atom. Deuterium has I think one neutron, and tritium has two neutrons, if I'm not mistaken. But whatever on that. They're hydrogen atoms. So two hydrogen atoms combine. They fuse together. As you would expect, it creates a ton of energy. And it creates a slightly heavier atom. So, right, helium is the next atom after hydrogen, so it's not that much heavier, right? And a neutron for the reaction to keep on going, kind of like the chain reaction idea with fission, right? So nuclear fusion is another way that, we can use to do nuclear things. We'll put it that way, all right? So hopefully you kind of get the picture of radioactivity, and how it developed with Becquerel, how it advanced with Marie Curie, and how it is applied in bombs, but also clean energy. People are skeptical of that, by the way, because their mentality is, well, what if the nuclear energy plant kind of, gets destroyed and you have energy, radiation that's spilled and leaked and whatever everywhere, and it makes the land inhabitable for a lot of time. Fair enough argument, but nah. By the way, just in case you're curious, when America was, developing and testing new nuclear weapons, they would evacuate super small little areas in the ocean, like little islands, and they'd tell the inhabitants, yeah, you know what, we're gonna pay you to live somewhere else for a while. We're gonna bomb your homeland to test out these new bombs, but hey, it's all good. You can come back in a little while once the radiation wears off. Well, in one instance where they did that, I hate to say this, but they bombed it so good, it's going to be uninhabitable for a long time, and so we're paying some people some money for that. You can look it up. It's pretty cool. There's your lesson on nuclear energy, my friends. You're going to have a project that's going to be on your Google Classroom, obviously modified from what you see here because you're doing this class at home. But you're going to do some work on the effects of radiation on the human body, as well as some other things. All right? So coming up next in the next video, my friends, we're going to go even further. We're kind of following a storyline here, because I told you that when Dalton was making his modern atomic theory, he had no idea of the three subatomic particles, the proton, neutron, and the electron. In fact, it was 94 years after he postulated his modern atomic theory that the small particles were found. And so, if you notice, I don't know if I put dates here for any of this nuclear stuff, but it was right in between the time of John Dalton up to the year 1897, when J.J. Thomson discovered the very first subatomic particle called the electron. But I digress, because that's in the next video.